Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kilowatt, a podcast about electric vehicles, renewable energy, autonomous driving, and much, much more. My name is Bodhi, and I am your host. And today, I'm just now realizing this is probably not the greatest place to record. I am at my friend's house in Vegas, and the pool heater's going, which is nice because she was nice enough to heat up the pool for us. But yeah, a lot of noise back there. But the house has more noise in it, so this is where we're doing it. On today's episode, I am joined by Jeremy Cohen, who is the Director of Real Estate Partnerships at SWTCH Energy. And what SWTCH Energy does is they work with real estate, think multifamily dwellings, commercial buildings, that kind of thing, to bring EV charging solutions on site. SWTCH Energy focuses on making EV charging easier. Like I said, at apartments, different workplaces, any place basically where you're going to have multi-tenant properties. They use this smart energy platform that they've built that allows more chargers to run existing infrastructure without doing any expensive upgrades. If you've listened to any of my interviews in the past on EV charging, you know bringing energy in or bringing capacity to the panel costs a lot of money. So SWTCH helps companies or property owners manage all of that. So this podcast is a little bit different than my normal one, only because I'm playing the video. So I recorded the video of Jeremy and I's interview. And if you want to go on YouTube and see us talk, you can do that. You don't have to. Obviously, this is edited for both audio and video, so you're not going to miss anything if you don't go to YouTube. But I'm trying something out. Trying something different out. Also, I should let you know when we were recording this, they were building my deck. So this was a couple of weeks ago, and we got interrupted several times. And I tried to edit around that, but you are going to hear occasionally some hammers or somebody drilling something into something. So just so you know, that's going to happen. I think I did a pretty decent job of getting around it. I didn't want to waste Jeremy's time by going through and re-recording it.
Nobody does selling better than Shopify. Shopify is the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret, with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts go abandoned and way more sales going through. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Skims uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period for 3 months at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
All right, with that, let's go ahead and welcome Jeremy to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Jeremy, you work for a company called SWTCH Energy, and you are the Director of Real Estate Partnerships. Can you first break down what SWTCH Energy does? And we're going to go into much more detail as we continue throughout the interview. But what SWTCH Energy does, and then what your position as the Director of Retail Estate Partnerships is.
Yeah, absolutely. So SWTCH is an EV charging solutions company. We've been around for 10 years. And really what we focus on is what we call multi-tenant. So providing EV charging solutions for residential, commercial, retail, mixed use settings, and going into environments without having to do large infrastructure upgrades. So a lot of our solution is based around energy load management and making sure that every building can be electrified, no matter how old or how big it is. And really my role in the organization is to work with developers and owners and operators of real estate to help them with their EV charging strategy. Just because no two portfolios are the same, no two buildings are the same, no two operators are the same. So really just helping navigate them as we look at their portfolios holistically all over the country to say, hey, this is where we should deploy EV chargers, at scale, or maybe we dip our toe in the pond over here in this region. So just really helping to navigate that whole transition.
Excellent. And do you find that most of the solutions are like level 2 solutions, or do you dabble in level 3?
Yeah, we definitely, I would say, majority of our deployments are level two. It's pretty much how we got started 10 years ago, and it's still our ethos till this day. We do also dabble in level three. I think it all just depends on the asset type. When we're talking multifamily or we're talking commercial, you'll really start to see just more level two deployments, longer dwell times. 80% of charging takes place at home or at the office. So level two is the preferred model there. And then level three is where you're really starting to see, retail shopping centers, major corridors, highways, things of that nature as well.
On the Switch website, it says that you have a whole platform. And I actually, last night, in preparation for the interview, I was like kind of going through this and I was like, oh my goodness, it goes, you have a lot of different solutions. So it sounds like it's not just something like where somebody reaches out to you and then you connect them to a bunch of third parties and we Frankenstein something together. It sounds like you have a whole solution from beginning to end.
Yeah, no, great observation. So essentially, our umbrella or suite of services is called Switch Cortex. And what Switch Cortex is these incredible suites of services that all revolve around EV charging. And the genesis of that is really so that way you don't have an owner and operator group that is consistently scratching their head saying, we need this, we need that, and we start working with multiple vendors. The Switch Cortex umbrella allows us as Switch to go into any type of environment and offer the right solution based on that environment's needs. So, whether that be your standard charger or the software services that we provide, going into energy constrained buildings and providing load management, which is something called switch control, and then really kind of knocking down these barriers that we have in underground garages where cell connectivity is really poor. We've developed our Switch Echo solution, and then Switch Connect, which is this incredible building platform, building services where we go into buildings and smart parking applications and property management services and integrate our software. So it's just one cohesive unit. So, I joke with groups, we can make it as elementary as we want it to be, or we can get as sophisticated as you want it to be also. But just know that EV charging kind of lives within the ecosystem of the built environment. So, we can kind of play in any type of arena and offer just the right solution overall.
So one of the things that fascinates me about EV chargers is like putting the infrastructure in place. Now, there have been EV charging companies in the past that like built a battery into the EV charger so that you wouldn't have to bring so much electricity into a structure. Can you walk us through how you would just kind of from the beginning to the end, how you would make sure that the property can supply electricity not only to the units, right, in a multifamily dwelling, but also how it would have enough for the charging infrastructure without breaking the bank?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, I'll lead off with a joke. I say, I think the electricians are really the ones who are getting rich in this business. But, when it comes to infrastructure, it's a team play. So I do also joke that it takes a village to get an EV charger in the ground because there's just so many people and parties involved to make it happen. But, on the basic level, it's an ownership group or an operator group who's interested in adding the EV chargers. And we always recommend a site visit because again, how I started this, this podcast off was no two properties are the same. You have no idea what electrical capacity you may have at a given building. You may have a 1970s building that has no power. You may have a 2000s building that's got a ton of power. So it really starts with the site visit. And with the site visit, the electrical contractors can see, one, how much available power do we have at the panel level? Two, where are we planning to put these chargers? And three, does this kind of make sense with what's going on at the building level? Where are residents likely to charge? Do they have deeded spots, in a condominium or in a multifamily, just in a classic multifamily building? Are we going to put this by the management office or the leasing office, so on and so forth? So, from there, really, you want to drive down the cost of the conduit and the run. So installing these chargers as close to the building's panel is really ideal. if you're an owner operator, you will see the cost delta on installing a charger that's really close to a panel versus one that is really far off, in the back corner of the lot where you think you want an EV charger. So infrastructure is its own beast. But, after you pretty much get the, getting numbers from these electricians, these electrical contractors to see what it takes, is it going to be a surface lot installation where they're going to run this wire, this conduit, they're going to bore, they're going to trench, they're going to rip up asphalt, then they have to repatch it. Are they installing a bollard? So there's just so many mechanics behind surface lots. And then you kind of go into an underground garage lot where you're not going to have as many of those mechanics because you're essentially just running more wires, more conduit, more Ethernet cable, but they can be mounted on the side of a garage or on a column pole rather than having to rip and, replace concrete. So, infrastructure is definitely something to be considered and not overlooked. That also comes with permitting as well and, longer lead times to just get these things in the ground. But just having the right team in place who definitely know the area, who know the utility companies, who know the permitting process and working with a team, that is regionalized makes all the more difference. From there, providing the proper EV charging hardware and software is the easy part.
So to give folks just a little bit of an idea, right, of what this can cost, for my charger that I have at my house, the charger's literally on the other side of the wall. So the panel's outside, the charger's like right here on the other side of the wall. That was about, I don't remember the exact price, but we'll say $800. When the guy came out, I said, hey, how much, just out of curiosity, how much would it cost to run it up and through the attic, which is easy attic space to get to, and then drop it down so that my wife and I don't have to switch sides of the garage that we park on. And he was like, give me a second. Thinks about it. And he was like, it would be about $1,200 more. And I said, cool, put it right here. We'll switch. We're fine. If it was like $300 more, let's do it. And he was like $1,200. So just to kind of give you an idea, that's like 16 feet, linearly. And it's, I don't know, probably less than 30 feet if you run it through the attic and drop it back down. I can imagine what that looks like if you're taking it, 300 feet from where the panel is in an already established parking lot. If it was a new parking lot, it might be a little bit of a different story. But yeah, it's not cheap. And you're right with the electricians.
Yeah, no, they got the best gig, in this whole industry. But, anytime you need to order more materials, more labor time for the job, naturally just the cost is going to increase significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, right? So are multi-unit, are these businesses reaching out to you, or are you reaching out to them? Like how are you letting people know that Switch does these, has these services available?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the benefits of being, an industry leader and being around for a decade is we have such a great client base that spans all across Canada and the US and Puerto Rico. And working with a lot of these large owner and operator groups, we get incredible referrals. We word spreads quickly. A lot of groups like to know what other vendors and contractors they're working with. So naturally, we'll get brought in. You start to have different portfolio groups. So, whether that be an ownership group that has, multiple portfolios, or you may even have an actual, let's say regional property manager that has multiple properties. So naturally, it's just kind of this, like this cascading effect. And we like to do a lot of marketing. We're out there. We hit all the major trade shows. We do a lot of public engagement and public speaking and, engagements, a lot of panels, a lot of webinars. We like to educate a lot. I think that's one of the beautiful things of this industry is even if you think you're an expert, there's still so much to learn. And there's also so many people that are just interested in the industry. So I think one of the things that we found early on is just to educate, tell people what's going on out there. There's so much to learn. And I think, with that expertise, people will look at you as just, a natural leader and educator. And, if you're putting out good product and good work, then I think, naturally they'll buy from you, which is great. So, Our team just does a really good job of just selling the right solutions. Like, I wouldn't say we're a pushy bunch at all. It's one of those, let's talk about your building, what type of asset, what type of environment is it, and just propose the right solution. I think people are over all that app fatigue and, analysis paralysis, where it's like, we're just going to hit you with the facts, and we're just going to make sure this works for you,
Yeah, and along the same lines as like proposing the right solution, your stack, right? You have the portal, the control, the nexus, the connect, all the charge. Can clients look at what you have to offer in your platform, and can they adopt certain pieces that make sense for them, or is it all kind of bundled into one, or
Yeah, I
maybe
mean,
in multiple bundles?
no, it's a great question. I would say at the core of it, at the end of the day, it is the EV charger and the software as a whole, and making sure that's up and operational. When you look at kind of the stack, it depends on, what you're looking to do at that given property. So, if we need to all of a sudden go from just installing EV chargers to now embedding the EV charger software, the switch software, into a smart building application or a smart parking application, that cost may be just a little different than the entry package of just people charging up their car and, us remitting revenue back to ownership. Now we start talking about AI. We have some incredible features where we have cord cutting detectors and we have surveillance videos and monitoring in a parking lot. Naturally, those things are just going to cost a little bit more. But, dealing with the right group who may, unfortunately, having dealt with theft and vandalism, they'll pay, for it because they want, access to that, suite of services. So again, it's just all depend on the right group, the right property and what they need. It's a consultative approach, in that manner. But just knowing that there's multiple tools in the tool belt, I think is just like a really great thing to have.
Is there some sort of partnership in terms of when somebody charges, does the property owner get all of that money? Is there a split between Switch and the property owner? How does that work?
Great question. So I joke, I say, we don't dip our hand in the cookie jar. So really, at the end of the day, our business is focused on providing the chargers and the software to support it, making sure that the actual EV driver's experience is great, and all of the revenue that's being generated from the EV charger is then just remitted back to ownership. Because at the end of the day, it's that owner's building, it's that owner's electric, it's the cost of their electric. So it's really on them to determine, what their markup wants to be. Do they want to put a markup on the electricity dispensed, and create a little profit? Do they want it to just be a break even, provided as an amenity and as nice to have? So however, we're happy to oblige, however ownership wants to structure, their financing model. And then we are essentially just remitting the revenue back to them. We're not taking, a revenue split with them. We're a software company. So really, at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're deploying the chargers. So that's the hardware. And then just having our software be the backbone of that. And the ownership groups are, essentially paying for our services, for our software.
So, okay, good. So whatever kind of service agreement you come up with, that's what they're paying. And beyond that, they're keeping the difference.
Yep. It's their revenue. It's their electricity. We're just, we'll be the bank, just making sure they get it back to them.
Perfect. And then you kind of mentioned on this a little bit when, there are certainly folks who have made a side business out of taking copper from somebody else and selling it somewhere else. What mechanisms do you have in place to kind of make sure that these charging systems are operational? Because if somebody is trying to make a little bit of a profit off of this, or even break even, having those chargers down for a period of time can, especially in a populated area, having those chargers down can be expensive for them. But also, how many times do you have to send a truck out there to diagnose what's going on? Is it that somebody took the charging cable, or is it that a board needs to be replaced? So how was Switch handling that?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's like if we didn't have to worry about providing great service and ensuring great uptime, you then have to worry about vandalism and theft. So, I think as a company, we approach it where how can we minimize this as much as possible? And it is creating these types of solutions where, we can provide a pedestal that has, eliminates as much cord cutting as possible. So it is essentially a heat detector. The actual cable itself would be smart enough to know when all of a sudden scissors are approaching the cable. And then once a potential cable is cut, there is a surveillance camera on top of the pedestal. It'll sound the alarm, the lights go on, and then video starts recording. That is then obviously sent to owners, to the operators, even the police department, so they can try and catch, that vandalism. And it's really unfortunate because it is happening in densely populated areas. Copper is definitely, for business or for sale type of industry also. So, we recognize that it's unfortunate. But, through O&M plans, ongoing maintenance and preventative plans, we can ensure that, if something unfortunate like this happens, we can get you a cable replacement quickly. We can replace the charger quickly. So there are packages out there that we definitely provide. Say, we acknowledge this is an unfortunate reality and, look at this like a potential insurance policy, if you will. So we do provide O&M plans. We do provide, these great cord cutting cable capability plans. But at the end of the day, it's really hard to stop someone who's on a mission to just, create more havoc.
So with that, how does Switch measure uptime and optimize uptime? Because numbers are fluid. 99% uptime for one company may not be what the reality is. So how does Switch kind of measure that?
Yeah, it's a good dovetail question because uptime for us too. We're trying to hit these 99% uptime numbers. I think, that is the value of the network. So we're able to diagnose problems a lot of times before owners and operators know that there's a problem, even before the driver knows there's a problem. So, our back end is pinging our software engineers, understanding for whatever reason this charger went down. Can we remote diagnostic in? And we'll make it happen. There are the few times where acts of God happen, right? Someone backs into a pedestal or a charger. The snowplow wiped out the charger. Someone cut the cord. Unfortunate, events. We do take that into effect also, during the numbers because, it is to be considered. So I think, unfortunately, we have to worry about those things and they do affect numbers. But I think for what we can control, as it is a software or network related issue, less so a hardware related issue, then the uptime is really, impressive. But to your point, like it is so fluid, and you get enough outages, that'll definitely decrease your score. So I think we look at portfolio wide rollouts. We look at site by site, too, and just saying, what can we do to maximize uptime? And that also includes, 24/7 support, support agents, tiered support agents, depending upon the actual problems that we encounter, how quickly are they escalated? How quickly are they resolved? I think at the end of the day, everyone is just really incentivized to just keep these chargers up and operational. Because you have to. It's a business at the end of the day, but it's also a user experience at the end of the day. You have those chargers down long enough, we're going to be hearing about it, and then, you want to keep a good reputation too. So I know it's a little broad, but the numbers are certainly fluid based upon, external factors, internal factors, you kind of name it.
Yeah, I don't think that's too terribly broad. Like I do understand it's not easy, especially if you are looking at, if you have one site and you have 99% uptime versus a company that has 70 sites and has 98% uptime,
Exactly.
the 99 is going to look better all day long.
Exactly.
I kind of want to go back because one of the things that I find the most interesting, and I should have asked this question earlier, but one of the things I find most interesting about EV chargers, and there's a lot, but the infrastructure and what it takes to put an EV charger in the ground. You're dealing with companies like Switch, you're dealing with the property owner, you're dealing with the local government, and then you have to deal with the utility, and not just the utility that's bringing the electricity in, but are there gas lines underneath us? Where's the water? Do we dig into this right here, or are we going to hit a water line and cause a huge problem later? Can you talk about kind of some of your experiences or the company's experiences in kind of negotiating and navigating that whole um, um, that whole fun, all those levels of bureaucracy. Let's put it that way.
Yep. No, I get it. I think one of the things our team does really well is gathering the troops. So anytime we have interest, a lot of our team gets together all stakeholders. So like you were saying, it's the property management, it's ownership, it's us, it's the electrician. And I would say the properties where we do really good work at is the properties that have all of their documents teed up. So we're asking a lot of the time for current site plans. Do you have a whole site plan of this community? Is it one building, or is this a master plan community? Is it a garden style community? So having the actual set plans of the property is big. Getting single line diagrams, of the electric is also really big. And then also navigating, how much property management knows, because we want to keep them in the loop as much as possible. We may not be the only CapEx project going on at the building. They may be doing a roof replacement, a boiler replacement, you name it. So then all of a sudden, whose work is going to stop? Who's going to get going first? Are we going to do this in conjunction? Do we need to shut down the garage for this? Do we need to hit the power, for a day? So I think having really great management also makes the difference. And I came from third-party property management before I was in EV charging. And, you can't stress communication enough in that industry. So, we are looking at site plans. We are looking at single line diagrams. We are communicating with management. There's also communicating with residents. Sometimes you have to break the hard news like, hey guys, we're going to have to shut down this garage, for a week. So whatever that may be. But I would say working with these electrical contractors that are really savvy for their area and working with the permitting departments and the building departments, they will know if there is water lines underneath. Are there gas lines underneath? Do we need to shut things down ahead of time? And that's why I joked with you earlier, Bodhi. I was saying it takes a village to get a charger in the ground. So, fortunately, knock on wood, we haven't experienced any, crazy water line breaks or anything of that nature. But I just think having all of the documents ahead of time makes the biggest difference. And I say that sincerely.
Yeah, I would imagine you mentioned that Switch has been around for 10 years. I would imagine that it's a lot easier today to put a charger in the ground than it was 5, even 3 years ago, right? But especially 10 years ago, forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it comes to, let's say a site brings in X amount of chargers and they're like, that wasn't enough. Maybe a couple years down the road, how easy is it to kind of scale up capacity?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I would start that conversation off by telling anyone who's interested, go more than what you think go for more chargers than you think you need, because eventually you're just going to need more. But, it's not always the case. So, I think things with just load management, and it could be as basic load management with some of the actual chargers, the hardware comes with. So all the way to advanced load management. So, you're sinking in, let's say 10 chargers at a clip. How much the panel was able to take, and that was the perfect number, let's say for 2 years ago. And now all of a sudden you have way more residents in your lot who have EV cars. They want to charge. You want to add more chargers. So you can essentially provide our switch control option. So that goes onto a mixed load panel. It knows exactly what's going on at the building level, and it's going to monitor the charger output through the course of the day and the night. And that also allows us to add more chargers onto a panel that may be even close to being maxed out. But what's going to happen in the industry is you're going to see more chargers added, but you'll likely see less output. So those chargers aren't going to be spitting out, let's say, a full 7.6 kW or 32 amps. They might be spitting out 3 kilowatts or let's say, 15 amps. Because in multifamily, we'll take multifamily for instance, multifamily charging is just like charging your cell phone. You go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, you plug in your phone, and you wake up at 6 a.m. the next day. You don't care how long it took. You just care that your phone is charged at 100%. Same exact thing is happening in multifamily. People are coming home from work 5 or 6 at night. They're going to plug in their level 2 charger. They're going to go to work at 6 a.m. the next day. They have 100% charge. It doesn't matter if it took 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours to get there. So back, kind of circling the airport, back to how we got to this initial question, Bodhi, was you're going to see more chargers eventually added with groups that don't want to do big infrastructure upgrades because they already did the infrastructure upgrade to get the chargers in the ground. You're going to see these chargers essentially dovetailing off of each other. They're speaking to each other. They're knowing when a charge is at 80%, then they can start throttling up the next charge to 20%, just to satisfy what's going on in the lot. And that's eventually how you're going to get to mass scale of chargers. And it'll be a slower play. It's not going to be as slow as a trickle charge for like a level 1 that's going to take 24 hours. But you're going to see probably a multifamily charger, if you have 20 or 30 in the lot and they're all sharing power, probably closer to 8 hours on a full charge. But it's the way to mass scale is that load management piece.
Yeah, and I have the ability to charge at 48 amps, but I dropped that down to like 26 because I don't really care. It starts charging at 9 o'clock at night, and typically, I'll get an alert at like 2 or 3 in the morning that it's charged. So definitely, if you're in a hurry and you don't have much time, that's a problem. But if you're not, or if you're charging during the daytime when nobody else is charging, you might get all of whatever's available to you.
That's exactly right. Utility companies incentivize those that aren't charging during peak hours too. So if you happen to be one of the lucky ones that works from home, charge up at 1 o'clock, charge from 1 to 5 when no one's at the building. But when everyone starts to come home at 5 or 6 at night, just know that one, the cost will probably be greater to charge as well as the slower charge. So, it becomes a game of chess at that point.
Yeah. And it is funny. I had this conversation with a coworker of mine just recently, and he's a brand new coworker, and he's like, yeah, I was going to go with an EV, and I had one friend that had this great experience with charging and another friend that had a terrible experience and with road trip charging. And he's like, I just didn't know what to do. And I was like, yeah, we'll talk later when we have a little bit more time. But the one friend, this was a couple of years ago when this happened, one friend was on CCS2 or CCS charging, and the other one was on was a Tesla. So totally different experiences for a lot of different reasons. Now we kind of all share the same network, so it doesn't really matter. But it's kind of one of those things with an EV. You have to change your mindset a little bit when it comes to putting energy back in the car.
Yep, you get a little more adaptable,
Yeah, and despite many saying it's the death of the EV, we're still continuing to see infrastructure for EV grow, whether it be level 2 or level 3 charging.
Yep.
Kind of with what you had to say, though, what does the development timeline and process look like once this contract is signed and the first car is charging? How long does that typically take?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the client and it depends on the asset. So we may be dealing with, let's say, a retrofit property that was built in 1980 and now they just purchased 4 chargers. And how soon can they get them? The shipping is not the problem. Shipping is a couple of weeks to get these chargers on site. It's making sure that we have to go through the permitting process, get the approvals. So sometimes it could take a couple of weeks, maybe upwards of a month. Then we do new developments where, the new development is pretty much ready to go and all the electrical infrastructure is already there. They've pulled wire and conduit to the spot, and all they have to do is just get the chargers to the site, mount them, and energize them. And that could be a couple of days. So it all depends, and then you start talking about fast charging and, level 3s and DCFCs. And, some of those projects takes, north of 6 months, 9 months, because you have to bring in a whole new transformer. So now you're dealing with the utility company, just waiting for them to drop a transformer, yet alone start doing the trenching and all that. So, those projects take forever. So again, it all depends on the asset type, but, I would say any project on a given day, what we see average wise could take about four weeks or so.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider, all of the permitting and all the cost and all of the trenching that has to go with a level 3, 4 weeks, you can have X amount of chargers on your property. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't want to confuse. I wasn't saying that. I was comparing level 2 infrastructure versus level 3. I'm not saying that level 3 would take 4 weeks because that's infinitely more complicated.
It may take them 4 weeks to ship from the manufacturer on that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about security, and then I want to talk about some customer-facing stuff because we've pretty much been sitting looking at the what the property owner would have to go through to get this done. When it comes to security, I'm assuming you're managing all of the firmware and software updates, and you're also managing like data and operational security.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is SOC 2 compliant. The highest compliance you could ask for, and that is required because, to your exact point, Bodhi, there's just so much data there. There's obviously resident information. You have credit cards to account for. But yes, no, security is definitely one of the biggest things. And sometimes we submit large RFPs to, let's say, universities where you have to have the highest of the highest. Security features. So it's something we take definitely seriously as being a network and a software provider.
What is an RFP?
Oh, like a request for proposal.
Okay.
So, sometimes you go into, let's just say, like a government proposal or an education proposal where, you're just going to have so many rules and regulations to follow. They take security, to the utmost standard. So, we just need to make sure that we're always abiding by that.
Gotcha. Now, in terms of the customer side of things, right? You mentioned that it may be that a property owner chooses not to charge, or maybe charge very little for the energy that it's providing to customers. How is like the billing? How is the billing handled, and the pricing? It sounds like the owners of the property get to choose their own rates, and then I would assume that they could do like time of day or usage or loitering fees, that kind of thing. Is that all baked in?
Yep, spot on. So, when we bring on a client, our customer onboarding team will provide them a form, and it says, how do you want to start to charge? How do you want to bill? And to your exact point, Bodhi, do they want to charge by kilowatt hour? Do they want to charge an hourly rate? Do they want to enforce loitering? I call it the kick in the butt to get off the charger. They can do all of it, and it's fluid. They're never, locked in. They can change it on a whim. And then once these chargers are in the field, you're talking about the customer experience. So there's 3-4 ways to pay, actually. 90% of our users download the Switch app. They create a digital wallet. They go up to the device and it pulls from their wallet. They start charging and it pulls from their wallet. The second is RFID cards. We can issue RFID cards that sit within the wallet. They tap the charger, it authorizes the device, and it pulls from their account when the charge is done. The third, is a QR code. There's always a QR code on all of the chargers. So even if you're a resident or even if you're a guest, you can just scan the QR code, input your information, initiate the charge. And then the fourth are credit card kiosks. That could be for level 2 as well as for level 3. And what Switch is doing is Switch is collecting all the revenue transactions over the course of a period of time. And we are just remitting it back to the ownership group. Because again, it's their money, it's their revenue, it's their electricity that they've decided to either mark up or not mark up. So, yep, just so many different ways, super flexible. And the team will help. We can help model margins if need be. You could see what's going on in a local area. How does your chargers compare to others in the area? Do we want to set these chargers as public chargers, as private chargers, maybe a mix of both? And what that allows you to do also is potentially charge different rates. If you've all of a sudden planted EV chargers, let's say like at a commercial office, well, maybe you want to charge the tenants who are there at work from 9 to 5 a certain rate, but then from 5 p.m. on, you can charge a different rate for transient users who just happen to find your chargers, on the Switch app or on Google Maps, on PlugShare. So there's just so much opportunity for an ownership group to really get creative in terms of monetizing.
Well, that's all I had for you, Jeremy. How would people find you if they wanted to learn more about what Switch Energy is doing?
Sure. It's feel free to reach out on my email. It's first name Jeremy, Jeremy .Cohen, Cohen, at switchenergy.com. There's no I in Switch.
Right. And I'll also put a link in the show notes with that information as well. I won't put your email in there because that's an easy way for people to just to spam you. But everything else I'll put in there.
After I just broadcast it out to the ether.
Yeah. Yeah. Except for when it's written down, and I used to have my email in my podcast notes, so it was easy for people to get a hold of me. And yeah, it's easy for everybody to get a hold of you, even if you don't want them to. So
it's a whole new world out here.
For sure. All right, sir. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you being so generous with your time.
No, my pleasure, Bodhi. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Nobody does selling better than Shopify. Shopify is the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret, with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts go abandoned and way more sales going through. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Skims uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period for 3 months at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
All right. I want to thank Jeremy for being so kind with his time, and again, patient, because we were going through some construction on the house. So we had to stop recording a couple of times and let them finish doing what they were doing. But yeah, I want to thank Jeremy for coming on. If you want to see what Switch is up to, it's SWTCH. So it's Switch without the I, energy.com. You can see what they're up to there. And then obviously Jeremy left his email, so you can contact him if you would like to do that. But I'm not going to put that in the show notes. I'll put everything else in the show notes, but I'm not going to put that in the show notes just because that is just a place to get scraped and Jeremy to get spammed. So, and yeah, I'm looking forward to our next episode, which is Chris Figueroa, and we're going to talk about Firecart, and we'll get into that more next episode. Thank you, everybody, and I will see you soon. Oh, you know what? If you want to email me, it's Bodie, BODIE @918digital.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn. That's Bodie Grimm, BODIEGRIMM. And then what else? You can support the show at supportkilowatt.com. All right, everybody, I'm going to dinner. Thank you so much. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. And this episode should be actually out on time. So pretty happy about that. Thanks so much.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.